Nobody told you that you passed. That is the only reason you are still standing outside a room you already hold the key to. Chosen one. There was a morning. Not the night of the disaster. Not the hour everything broke open. The morning after it. You woke up inside a body that did not want to move, and you did something completely ordinary. You made the coffee. You washed the one cup. You answered a message kindly when you had every right not to. You did the small decent thing when no part of you felt like it. You did not announce it. You did not write it down. You did not even notice it, and by that evening you had already forgotten that the whole day happened. It went into your memory as nothing, as a Tuesday. That was the test, not the disaster. The morning after the disaster, and thousands of people arrive at that exact morning, in that exact body with that exact weight sitting on their chest, and they do not do what you did. They stay down. They send the cruel message back. They let the small decent thing go undone, and honestly, no one would blame them for it. You did not merely pass. You passed so quietly that you filed the victory as an ordinary day and then went out looking for the real one. That is the whole reason you have spent months and maybe years waiting for a result that had already been recorded and sealed. In the next hour, 3 things are going to happen to you, and they are different in kind. First, you will understand why the reward for a spiritual test never arrives as an event, which is the single reason you concluded that you had failed something. Second, you will feel something set down that you have been carrying since the season ended, because a part of you has never actually left the exam room. And third, you will be able to do something you have never once had the tools to do. You will receive the actual grading criteria, the 4 things that were being measured while you were certain nothing was being measured at all. You will be able to score your own paper honestly, and you will never again have to guess whether you are passing your life. Let me hand you the first one right now, so you know this hour is not comfort with nothing inside it. Think of one specific kind of blow, a betrayal, a loss, a door closing in your face while you were still speaking. Choose the category, not the story. Now remember how long that category of blow took you to recover from 5 years ago. Weeks, probably. Maybe an entire season. Maybe you can still name the months you lost to it. Now remember the last time something from that same category came for you. It hurt. Of course it hurt. Nobody here is asking you to pretend otherwise. But how long was it before you ate a real meal? Before you called someone back? Before you opened a window, or laughed at something stupid, or got out of the house? It was shorter. It was measurably shorter, and you never once counted it. That number is the test. Character is not measured at the peak of a crisis because at the peak everybody performs. It is measured by how long it takes a person to come back. And yours has been shrinking for years while you were busy calling yourself fragile. Here is the part that hurts and heals in the same breath. The reward for passing is never an event. It is a capacity, and capacities are silent. So, you kept waiting for a phone call, a door, a sign, while the actual prize was being installed in the one place you are not able to look at directly. There is a full grading rubric underneath all of this. There is also one specific window that opens only after a person passes, and almost nobody is ever told that it is open. Both of those are coming. Stay exactly where you are. Right now, while this is still landing, put 2 words below. It counted. Say it for the morning after. The one nobody clapped for. The one with no witness and no name on it. That comment will be the first time that day has ever been entered into any record anywhere in this world. Chosen one, stay with me. I am going to read you your results. Let me describe your situation back to you, and you can tell me whether I am close. You have been functioning. That is the word. Not thriving, not collapsing, functioning. If someone asked, you would say things are fine, and it would not even be a lie, and yet there is a low, quiet static underneath the whole arrangement that never fully clears. Here is the first sign. You achieve something, a real thing, something that would have thrilled you at 25, and you feel almost nothing. A flat calm where the celebration should be. You wait for the feeling to arrive the way you wait for a delivery that keeps getting delayed, and eventually you stop waiting and move on to the next thing. Here is the second. You brace before good news. Someone starts a sentence with, "I have something to tell you," and your whole body prepares for impact before a single detail arrives. You have trained yourself to survive an announcement. Third, you over-prepare for a repeat of something that has already finished. The season ended, and still some part of you keeps the emergency bag packed by the door. You keep a small permanent budget of dread for a bill that already got paid. Fourth, you feel older than the people your age, and not in your body, in something behind your eyes. You sit in ordinary conversations and you feel like a person who has come back from somewhere and cannot mention it. You are not superior. You are just further along a road nobody chose. You have wondered for years what is wrong with you. Nothing is wrong with you. Something is unread. So, let me say the thing plainly, without decoration, because you have had enough decoration. The test was never the pain. Everybody assumes the pain was the test. It was not. The pain was only the conditions under which the test was administered. The same way the storm is not the exam. It is only the weather on the day of the exam. The test was what you did the morning after the pain. It was the coffee. It was the kind reply. It was the promise you kept to yourself at 6 in the morning when there was not one human being alive who would have known if you broke it. That was the paper. That was the whole paper. And you passed it so quietly that you filed the victory as an ordinary Tuesday. If the test was the morning after, then every internal accusation you have made against yourself for the last several years was built on the wrong scoring system. You have been grading yourself on the storm. Heaven was grading you on the coffee. And I want to be careful and honest with you here, because you deserve care more than you deserve flattery. I am not going to tell you I know your name or your street or the number of years you have been at this. I do not. What I know is the pattern, and I have watched the pattern hold in enough lives that I am willing to describe it out loud and let you check it against your own life. If it does not fit, put it down and walk away with my blessing. But if a specific morning arrived in your mind while I was describing it, uninvited, complete with the light and the temperature of the room, then you already know this is not a general message. Something in you kept that morning on file when your mind threw it away. That is not sentiment, that is evidence. So let us begin with the symptom, and I want you to feel how precisely I can name it, because the precision is the proof. The symptom is a conviction, not a thought, a conviction, which is much heavier. The conviction that somewhere back there, you missed it. That there was a moment with your name on it, a door, a version of your life, and you were not ready, and it went past you. You cannot point to the moment. That is the cruelty of it. If you could point to it, you could grieve it and be done. Instead, you carry a formless verdict with no evidence attached, and it whispers underneath every good thing that arrives. It says, "This is nice, but it is not the one you were supposed to have. Now let me deny the cause you have assigned to it. You have decided that you failed because of something in you, because your faith was thin in the 3rd month, because you went quiet with God for that stretch, and did not pray for 11 weeks, and assumed that the silence disqualified you, because you were not the kind of person who handles things beautifully. That is not what happened. And I am not saying it kindly to spare you, I am saying it because it is structurally wrong. Every one of those items is a description of what a human being does under sustained pressure. If thin faith in the 3rd month disqualified people, the record of the faithful would be empty. The men and women remembered for their trust all said out loud that they could not take another day. Here is the actual mechanism, and it is going to be uncomfortable for about 10 seconds before it becomes the best news you have had all year. Nothing was being measured at the peak. Nothing. The peak was not the exam. At the peak, the body takes over. Adrenaline arrives, focus narrows, and even a person with no character at all performs well for a short burst, because survival is not a virtue, it is a reflex. What was being measured is the return, the interval, how long from the blow to the moment you re-enter your own life. That is the number, and it is the only number that cannot be faked, because it is produced by what you actually are when nobody is watching and there is no adrenaline left to borrow from. And the reason nobody told you is that the measurement is invisible from the inside. You cannot feel your own recovery interval shrinking any more than you can feel your hair growing. It only shows up if somebody sets 2 seasons side by side and makes you compare them, which is exactly what I did to you a few minutes ago. So let me take you back through your own history with the correct instrument in your hand, because the story you tell about your past is about to change shape. That season you call the year I fell apart. Go back into it. Yes, you fell apart. And how long? Now the one 4 years later that you also call falling apart, using the same phrase, filing it in the same drawer. How long that time? You know the answer. The second one was faster, not because it hurt less. It may have hurt more. It was faster because you were carrying something you did not have the first time, and you built that thing during the first one, in the dark, without instructions, at a cost nobody itemized. You did not fall apart twice. You fell apart once, and then recovered from a second blow at a speed that would have been impossible for the earlier version of you. That reframe has a consequence I want you to take with both hands. If recovery latency is the measurement, then it is measurable by you, at any time, for free, without a single other person confirming it. You do not need a prophet, a leader, a partner, or a public result to know where you stand. You need 2 dates and an honest memory. That is what returning agency looks like, not a feeling. An instrument you can use on your own. If something just landed, put 3 words underneath. I recovered faster. Not, I am healed. Not, I am fine. I recovered faster. It is a smaller sentence, and it is a truer one. Put it down where you can see it later, because there will be a week this winter when you need to read it back. Now, I want to give you a man to stand next to, because a principle you cannot watch inside a human life stays theoretical. There is a story people tell about Joseph, and everyone tells the ending. The palace, the ring, the brothers on their knees. The ending is not where the test was. The test was in the prison, on the morning after the cupbearer forgot him. Understand what actually happened. He had interpreted a dream correctly. He had asked one thing, remember me when it goes well for you. And the man walked out into his restored life and forgot Joseph completely. Not delayed, forgot. And Joseph found out slowly, the way you find out slowly, by a phone that does not ring across a series of ordinary mornings. 2 more years. And what does the record say he did in those 2 years? It says the keeper of the prison put everything under his hand, which means that on the morning after the forgetting, with no reason left to believe anything was coming, this man got up and administered a prison well. He did the small, competent, decent thing in a place that would never report it. Nobody clapped. There was no visit, no vindication, no announcement, and no way for him to know that the whole thing had already turned. He was not waiting well, because he had a promise in his hand. He had already watched a promise fail to arrive on schedule. He got up anyway. That is the exam, and it is happening in your life, in a form so unglamorous that you have not recognized it as the same event. And I want to say the emotional part now rather than leaving it for later. What was done to you was not fair. I am not going to spiritualize that away. Some of what you carried should never have been handed to a person, and certainly not to you at the age you were when it arrived. It is legitimate to be tired. It is legitimate to have wanted an easier assignment. You handled it anyway. Not perfectly. Nobody handles it perfectly, and the standard was never perfection. You handled it in the specific way a person handles something too heavy, which is badly for a while, and then steadily. And the steadily part is the part you have refused to give yourself any credit for, because it did not feel like heroism. It felt like Tuesday. It felt like getting through. I will tell you one more, from this century, from a person whose name I will not give because the story is not mine to sell. A woman spent 4 years caring for a parent who no longer knew who she was. 4 years of a relationship with no return signal, feeding someone who could not thank her, in a house that got quieter every month. The parent died. And here is the part she told me she was ashamed of, which is the part that is actually the whole point. In the first week after the funeral, she felt nothing but relief, and she hated herself for it. Then, on a Thursday about a month later, she noticed she had been going to the neighbor across the street every few days. An old man, no family nearby. She had not decided to do it. She had simply carried on being the person those 4 years had made her, pointed at the next human being who needed it. She thought she had wasted 4 years. What actually happened is that 4 years built a capacity, and the capacity started spending itself the moment it was free. She was never given a certificate. The neighbor never knew what he was receiving. If you had asked her that Thursday how her spiritual life was going, she would have said she felt distant from God and was not sure she believed anything anymore. Hold that Thursday, because there is something underneath it I am not ready to hand you yet. Researchers, studying people who came through long ordeals, found something unexpected. It was not about willpower or belief. It was a physical state the mind falls into under long strain, a state that does not switch off when the strain does. In that state, a person can look directly at the opening they prayed for and not see it as an opening. There is a name for what closes. So here is the question that sits underneath this entire hour. What if you did not fail the test, and you are only standing in the room where the results are posted, unable to read them? If that question landed somewhere real, put 4 words below. I stop resitting it. Because that is what has been happening. You have been sitting the same exam over and over in your head at 2 in the morning, marking your own paper with a red pen and a rubric nobody gave you. Say it once and mean it. You stop resitting an exam you already passed. Now, let me get to the thing I promised. The reason no announcement ever came. I want you to understand the difference between an event and a capacity, because your entire disappointment lives in the gap between those 2 words. An event has a date. It arrives. It is witnessed. It can be photographed. It can be told to your family at a table. A capacity has no date at all. It is installed quietly across a long stretch of time, and it announces itself only later in use. Think about what a capacity actually is. It is not a feeling. It is not confidence. It is the ability to do a thing that you previously could not do. And the moment a capacity exists inside you, it stops feeling remarkable and starts feeling normal. Ability is invisible to the person holding it. Nobody walks around amazed that they can read. So when you finished that season and the phone did not ring, you looked for an event and found none. No promotion arrived. No apology came. Nobody stood up and named what you had done. And your mind, a very good instrument used on the wrong task, drew the only conclusion available to it. If there was no prize, there was no pass. But the prize was already in your hands. Watch. The people around you have started bringing you things. Have you noticed? The hard conversations get routed to you. The friend in the crisis calls you rather than the person she calls about ordinary days. Someone at your work or in your family has recently said, a version of you always know what to say, and you brushed it off because from the inside, It did not feel like a gift. It felt like Tuesday. That is the prize. It was installed in you during the exact months you called wasted. You are now able to sit inside another human being suffering without flinching, without fixing, without needing it to end, so that you can be comfortable again. Do you know how rare that is? Most people cannot be in a room with real pain for 11 minutes. You can stay for months. You learned that somewhere, and the tuition was extremely high. There is a second one, and it is even quieter. You have lost the ability to be impressed by things that do not matter. That looks like cynicism from the outside, and it is not cynicism, it is calibration. You spent a season next to something real, and the machinery that used to be moved by status and noise and applause simply stopped responding, because it had been recalibrated by contact with the actual weight of a life. And now I want to give you a word, because a name will hold this in place long after this hour ends. There are two different words in the older language, the Greek, that the earliest records were written in, and almost everyone collapses them into one English word, which is why almost everyone misunderstands their own life. The first word is peirasmos. It means the ordeal itself, the trial, the pressing, the season, underweight. It is the storm. It is what you have been praying to be delivered from, and there is nothing wrong with that prayer. It is the oldest prayer there is, and every honest person has prayed it while sitting on a bathroom floor. The second word is dokimos, and dokimos does not mean tested. It means tested and approved. It was not originally a spiritual word at all. It came from the metal trade. It was what you stamped on gold or silver after it had been through the fire, once the impurities had risen and been drawn off, and what remained had been examined and confirmed as genuine. Dokimos meant, this has been through the fire, and it is real. You may accept it as payment anywhere. Sit inside that for a moment. Two different words. And most people spend their entire lives praying to be delivered from peirasmos while the stamp has already been struck into them. The metal does not get consulted. The metal does not receive a letter. The stamp goes on. The assayer moves to the next piece, and the gold sits there in the tray, still hot, still believing it is being punished. Nobody read the stamp out loud to you. That is the entire injury. Not that you failed, that there was no ceremony. And a human being who receives no ceremony will invent a verdict to fill the silence. And the verdict a tired person invents is always against themselves. So, let me do something small and physical, because this needs to reach further down than you're thinking. Wherever you are, let your shoulders drop about an inch. Most people find they were holding them without knowing. Now, unclench your jaw. Now, notice the place in your body where you keep the exam, because there is one. For some people, it is the chest. For a lot of people, it is right at the base of the throat, where an announcement would come out if one were ever going to be made. Put your attention there and breathe once, slowly, all the way down past it. That tightness has a job. It has been holding the question open, waiting for a result, keeping the file active for years, and it is allowed to be told that the result came in. Not that everything is fixed. Not that the pain was worth it. Only that the paper was marked and the marking is finished, and it is no longer your job to keep the exam room open. Now, if you are the kind of person who thinks carefully, and I suspect you are, something in you has raised an objection over the last few minutes, and I want to take it seriously rather than talk over it. The objection sounds like this. This is a nice way of feeling better about not getting what I wanted. This is just positive thinking with older vocabulary. Somebody has taken my failure and renamed it a pass, and renaming a thing does not change it. That is a fair objection, and it deserves a real answer, not a soft one. So, here is the difference, and it is a difference of direction. Positive thinking asks you to assert something about the future that has not happened yet. Say, the money is coming. Say the door is opening. Say it enough and it becomes true. That method asks you to make a claim with no evidence and then defend it with enthusiasm, and I understand exactly why you are tired of it. What I am doing is the opposite in every direction. I am not asking you to claim anything about the future. I am asking you to measure something that has already happened using data you already possess, that I have no access to whatsoever. I cannot see your recovery interval. You can. If you compared those 2 seasons a few minutes ago and the second one was not faster, then this does not apply to you, and no amount of enthusiasm will make it apply. That is what separates a measurement from a mantra. A measurement can come back negative, a mantra cannot. Everything I have handed you tonight is falsifiable inside your own memory, which is precisely why I am comfortable saying it out loud to a person as tired as you are. And there is a second person listening, and this one I have more affection for, because this one has actually done the work. This is the veteran. You have tried everything. You have read the books, some of them twice. You have done the fasts and the journals and the counseling and the early mornings. You have stood at the front of a room with your hands open more than once. You have had genuine encounters, and you have had months where you felt nothing at all. And now there is a specific fatigue in you that people who have never tried do not have. It is not skepticism. Skepticism is cheap. Yours is the exhaustion of somebody who has been sincere repeatedly and has watched sincerity not be enough, and who has quietly begun to suspect that the problem must therefore be them. That is a heavy place to stand, and I am not going to insult you by pretending it is a small one. So let me say the thing that I think you need said. The reason none of it worked is not that you did it badly. It is that every single one of those tools was designed to help a person get through the ordeal. Endurance tools. Books for the middle of the storm. They are good books, and they did their job. And you are not in the middle of the storm anymore. You have been out for a while, and you have kept using storm equipment, which is why it feels like nothing fits. You do not need more endurance. You are one of the most enduring people in your own family line, and everybody knows it, which is exactly why they keep handing you things. What you need is a completely different instrument, one for the person who is already through, and almost nobody makes that instrument because almost nobody thinks to look for it. Whatever you failed at, you did not fail at trying. Let us take that accusation off the table permanently. Which brings me to the third revelation, and this one explains the silence itself. There is a reason the result was never announced, and it is not neglect, and it is not cruelty. Every human institution you have ever been through trained you to expect a specific sequence. You take the test, then within a set period, somebody posts the result, and everyone finds out at the same time. School did that. Work does that. Every system you have ever moved through does that. Heaven does not run on that sequence, and there is a name for what happens instead. The delayed grade. Here is what it means. The grading is finished, the result is recorded, and the notification is withheld, sometimes for years. And the withholding is not punishment, it is the last section of the exam. Because a result announced immediately produces a very particular kind of person, and it is not the kind of person you were being made into. Think about who you become if the applause arrives on time, every time. You become somebody who does the decent thing while checking the room for a witness. You become someone whose kindness is dependent on being seen, and that person is completely useless in the situations that actually require someone. Because the situations that require someone occur in rooms where there is no witness at all. The delay is what produced the only version of you that can be trusted with what is coming. So the years you spent thinking you had been forgotten were not empty years, and they were not silent years. They were the section of the test that measures what you do with no feedback whatsoever. And you did not know you were being watched, which is the only reason the measurement is worth anything. If you had known, it would have proven nothing about you. I want to be careful here as well. I am not telling you God delayed a specific outcome in your life for a specific reason that I can name. I do not know that, and anybody who claims to know it is selling you something. What I can tell you is that this pattern, the finished work that goes unannounced, runs through every account of a life that later turned out to matter, and it has never once been because the person was not chosen. Now, let me show you what it looks like when the grade finally gets read. Not a fantasy, a Tuesday, about a year from now. It is an ordinary morning and something has gone wrong. A message you did not want to receive. A number that does not work. A person withdrawing again in a way that used to take you apart entirely. You feel it land. You are not made of stone and you do not want to be. There is a drop in your stomach and a heat behind your eyes, and you sit down on the edge of the bed for a minute with the phone face down beside you. That is real, and it happens. And then you get up, not heroically. You just get up and you put the water on, and you hear it start to move in the kettle the way it does every morning. And halfway through making it, standing in your kitchen in the same light as always, something odd happens. You notice that you are fine. Not fine in a brave way, fine in an ordinary way, the way a person is fine. And the surprise of it stops you where you stand, because the version of you from 5 years ago would have lost 11 days to that message, and you have lost about 9 minutes. That is the moment. Not a door opening, not a stage, not a name announced in front of anybody. Just you, holding a warm cup in a quiet kitchen, understanding for the first time in your life what you were actually given. And you will laugh, a little, on your own. And there will be nobody there to see it. And for the first time that will not bother you at all. Now, before we go further, I need you to know where we are, because a lot of people leave right about here. They get the relief, they feel the weight shift, and they go back to their day thinking they have received the message. What you have received so far is the diagnosis. The largest part of this is still in front of you, and it is the part with the actual instrument in it. There are 2 things left that matter more than everything I have said. The first is the exact grading criteria, the 4 things that were being measured, laid out plainly enough that you can score your own paper before this hour is over. The second is what happens in the weeks right after a person passes, which is the most dangerous stretch of a life and the one nobody warns you about. Stay for both, especially the second one. But first I have to address the thing in the title, because I refuse to hand you a lie in order to make you feel special for 11 minutes. I am not telling you that you are the first human being in history to pass a spiritual test. That would be absurd, and you would be right to shut this off. Millions of people have passed. The record is full of them, and heaven has never had a shortage. Here is what is actually true, and it is stranger and better. The test is not a public examination with 1 seat. It is individual. It is set for each person separately, calibrated to that specific life, that specific family, that specific wound. There is no curve. You were not competing against anyone, which means the passing was yours alone, and so was the paper, and so is the grade. And thousands of people do arrive at that same morning. That is the honest part. Thousands wake up the day after the disaster with the same weight in the same chest, and most of them do not do what you did, and I will not pretend to know why some do and some do not. But here is where the word first belongs, and it is not a small word once you put it in the right place. You are the first in your line. Look back through your family. That pattern, the one you can name in about 4 seconds, the thing that ran through your parent and their parent, and probably further back than anyone kept a record of. The anger that got passed down like furniture, the leaving, the drinking, the silence that fell over that house every time something real needed to be said. It came to you. It arrived at your door with your name on it, exactly as it had arrived at theirs, and it fully expected to be handed on, because it always had been. And somewhere in that season, without a ceremony and without a single person to congratulate you, you did not hand it on. You broke it. That is what first means. Not first in history, first in your line. And nobody in your family knows it happened, including you, until about 90 seconds ago. Do you understand how much that cost? You had no model. Every person you could have learned it from had already failed at it, which is why the pattern reached you in the first place. You had to invent the response with no example in front of you, while carrying the damage of the people who could not do it. That is the hardest form of any test there is, and you sat it alone, without a teacher, and you passed. So let me ask you to do something small and physical, because your body has been holding this, and your body needs to be told. Picture the paper. Whatever an exam paper looks like to you, it has been in your hands for years. You've been carrying it into rooms and into conversations and into your bed at night, marking it and remarking it with a red pen that no one ever gave you the authority to hold. Look at the top of it. There is a mark there. There has been a mark there the entire time. You have been so busy correcting the middle of the page that you never once looked at the top. And now, put the pen down first. Not the paper yet, just the pen. Set it on the table beside you and feel what your hand does when it is no longer gripping. Then say it, out loud if you can, and put it below where you can find it again. I set the paper down. Now let us breathe for a minute, you and I, because that was heavy, and you are allowed to rest inside this rather than being marched through it. There is nothing to understand for the next little while. Nothing to do. I want to tell you about my grandmother, or rather about her hands, because that is what I remember. She was a woman who had lost more than she ever discussed. 2 of the losses I only found out about after she died, from a cousin. In the flat way people deliver enormous things when they assume you already know. She never mentioned either one, not once in my hearing, across an entire childhood. What she did every morning was make bread, not as a hobby and not as a statement. There was flour, and there was a bowl, and there was the same movement of her wrists at the same hour. In a kitchen that got colder every winter, she lived in it. I used to think it was a small life. I was young, and I thought largeness was measured in events. I understand now what I was watching. That was a person who had been through fire and had decided every single morning for about 50 years that the day would still get its bread. Nobody gave her anything for that. There was no recognition and no title, and no moment where somebody stood up and said what she had actually done with her life. She just did it, and the house smelled like it. And 4 generations of us are the way we are because of a woman standing at a counter at 6 in the morning with nothing to gain. If you are lucky you had one of those. If you did not, then you are the one, and that is a harder assignment, and it is also a greater one. And I want you to sit for a second with the possibility that in 40 years, somebody will remember your ordinary mornings the way I remember hers. And there is one more thing before this hour is finished. Something I am going to ask you to do with your hands at the very end when you are ready. Not yet, but it is coming, and it closes this properly. Now, let me go back to what I left open earlier. I told you researchers found a state the mind falls into under long strain. Here is what I did not say. That state does not end when the ordeal ends. It keeps running, and it makes a person unable to recognize the very thing they spent years asking for while standing directly in front of it. That is why you cannot read your own results. So here it is, the thing I promised you in the first 3 minutes. The 4 things that were actually being graded. Hear this before I begin. None of the 4 is what you assumed. Not one of them measures how much you prayed, how strong you felt, or whether you said the right things in front of the right people. They have a name. The invisible rubric. The first criterion. Whether you stayed kind when there was nothing in it for you, not kind to people who could help you, not kind in public, kind to the person who could not return it, would not remember it, and had nothing to offer you in any direction. The waiter on the worst day of your year, the stranger who got the last of your patience when you had almost none left. Go and look. You will find dozens of them, fast, because you never spent them for a return and never filed them anywhere. Every one of those was a mark on the page. That is what the criterion is measuring, whether kindness in you is a transaction or a substance, and the only way to find out is to remove every possible payment and see what you do. The second criterion, whether you kept a promise made only to yourself. This is the one people fail most often, and it is the one that carries the most weight, because a promise to another person is enforced by shame and reputation. A promise made to yourself, alone, in your own kitchen, has no enforcement of any kind. Nobody finds out. And you kept some. Not all. Nobody keeps all, and the standard was never all. But there was a thing you told yourself you would do in that season, and it was small, and it was probably ridiculous, and you did it anyway on the days when there was no reason to. The walk, the page, the hour you did not drink, the call you made every Sunday when nobody would have known if you skipped it. That is a person building a self that can be relied upon, and it is graded heavily, because everything that comes later has to be built on top of it. The third criterion, whether you stopped retaliating. Hear me carefully, because this one gets taught badly and the bad teaching has hurt people. This is not about whether you forgave in your heart. That is between you and God, and it takes as long as it takes. This is about your hands, whether you took the shot when it was available to you, because it was available. There was a moment when you knew exactly what to say to cut that person open. You had the information, you knew the sentence, you had every justification a human being could want, and you did not say it. You went home and closed the door and sat with it instead, and you called that weakness, and you have replayed it for years, wishing you had been braver. That was not weakness. That was the hardest mark on the entire page. Anybody cannot retaliate when they have no weapon. You had the weapon in your hand and you set it down, unwitnessed, and told nobody, and then criticized yourself for it. Let me be the one to tell you what that was. And the fourth, whether you continued after the motivation was gone. This is the criterion that separates everything. In the first weeks of any ordeal, there is a strange fuel available. People check on you. There is a story with a shape to it, and you can feel yourself inside something meaningful. Anyone can move during that stretch. Then month 7 arrives. The messages stop. Everybody else has gone back to their own lives. The story has no shape anymore, and there is no end date, and no audience, and no feeling, and you kept going. Not gloriously. You went slowly, badly, resentfully, with long periods of doing the minimum, and you kept going. That is the fourth mark, and it is the one heaven weighs most heavily, because it is the only one that cannot be produced by emotion. So score your own paper. 4 criteria: kind with nothing to gain, a promise kept to yourself alone, the weapon set down, continued after the feeling left. Go criterion by criterion through your own worst season, and be honest, and do not round down the way you always do. I think you know what the page looks like. I think you have known since the second one. A mark on a page is not the point. The point is what it buys downstream. Picture a room some years from now. There is a young person in it who belongs to you in one way or another. Yours, or the child of a sibling, or a person who simply attached themselves to you because you were the safe adult in a difficult year. They are telling you something difficult, and watch what does not happen. The old reaction does not fire. The thing that lived in your family for 4 generations, the flare, the cold silence that used to fall over rooms like weather, does not arrive, because it was not passed on. It stopped in a season nobody photographed, in a person who had no idea they were doing anything historic. That young person will grow up not knowing what they were spared. They will never thank you, because you cannot thank someone for an absence. They will simply move through their life without a specific wound that everyone before them had to carry, and they will hand that lightness to somebody else, and it will keep going long after your name is forgotten in that family. That is the actual prize. It was never going to be a phone call. And there is something bigger underneath all of this that I have to give you before we finish, because without it, the rest is only comfort. Everything you have heard so far explains the past. What remains explains the next few months of your life, and it is the reason so many people who genuinely pass end up going nowhere afterward. Not because the past was false, because of what the passing leaves running inside them. So let me put the whole thing in plain language now, with no metaphor, because you have been given a lot, and you deserve to have it stated flatly enough to repeat to somebody else tomorrow why this happened to you. Because character cannot be measured at the peak, only in the return, and a measurement taken over years cannot be announced without ruining what it measures. That is the mechanism. But the deeper reason, the one that explains everything after this hour, is what a long ordeal leaves behind in the mind. The mind adopts a configuration in order to survive. Watchfulness, narrowed focus, a permanent readiness for the next blow. That configuration is brilliant, and it is expensive, and it does not switch itself off when the season ends. It keeps running for months, and sometimes years afterward. And while it runs, a person cannot see an opening, even when the opening is directly in front of them. There is a name for that stretch. The post-pass window. What it is, plainly, it is the weeks and months right after you pass, when everything is finally available to you, and you are the least equipped you have ever been to notice it. Doors open in that window. Introduction arrive. Ideas that would change the direction of your life pass within reach. And an exhausted mind, still running survival configuration, categorizes every one of them as a threat or as noise and lets them go by. And who this is for? Not everyone. It is for the person who has already passed. If you have not been through anything yet, none of this applies to you, and there is no reason to want it to. It is for the one who did the work, alone, unwitnessed, and then stood in the silence afterward and concluded that they must have gotten it wrong. If that is you, then put 4 words below and mean them. I read my own stamp. You spent all those years reading the storm and calling it a verdict. Now read the stamp instead. One of those was written by the weather. The other one was struck into you by fire, and it has been there the whole time. So let me finally hand you the whole of what I have been circling. That state I described, the one that keeps running after the ordeal ends, the reason a person can stand in the room where their own results are posted and be unable to read them. It is not a metaphor, and it is not a mood. It has been measured, and it was measured somewhere you would not expect. There is a study that won the Nobel Prize in 1981, not from a church, not from a seminary, not from anybody selling anything spiritual, from a research laboratory. The man who won it was Dr. Roger Sperry, and his work on the divided mind explains a great deal about people like you. He proved that the mind runs as 2 halves, and that those 2 halves are built to operate in synchrony. When they are synchronized, what researchers describe is whole brain activation, logic and intuition working at the same moment instead of taking turns. Solutions that arrive complete rather than being assembled. Here is the measurement that stops people. 98% of children test at creative genius level. Fewer than 1 in 1,000 adults still do. Something occurs in between, and it is not sin, and it is not thin faith. Sustained strain, constant noise, and years of vigilance degrade the coordination between the two halves. It is a physiological reality and not a spiritual failure. Steve Jobs described the synchronized state. Nikola Tesla described it. Taylor Swift describes it when asked where a song comes from. A woman from California described the 2 years after her mother died. She said she was functioning and completely fogged, reading the same paragraph 4 times, forgetting why she had walked into rooms. She started sitting with headphones for 8 minutes each morning before anyone in the house was awake. The change was not dramatic. By the 3rd week, she noticed she had finished a thought, then another one, and then she wrote 4 pages of something she had been circling for a decade. A man from Texas said 11 months of a business collapse had left him with nothing inside. His words were that the storm ended and he stayed in storm mode. He had done everything: counseling, fasting, long walks, a great deal of prayer, and none of it touched the flatness he was carrying. After a few weeks of the 8-minute sequence, he said, it was like somebody had finally turned the lights back on in a house he had been living in dark. Here is what they were both using. A team of neuroscientists, led by Dr. Daniel Barone in New York, took over an hour of clinical neural sync technology, the kind that had previously required a laboratory and a great deal of money, and compressed it into an 8-minute targeted auditory sequence. Headphones on, eyes closed, 8 minutes a day. They call it the genius switch. Let me be exact about what it is not, because you have been sold things before. It is not a meditation app. It is not a sound product or relaxing background audio. It is a targeted auditory sequence engineered from the Sperry Nobel research, built to reconnect the two halves and restore whole brain activation in a mind that has been running the survival configuration for too long. Until recently, the only routes to that state were clinical neurofeedback at around $300 an hour in person or $7,000 for a home machine, or disciplines like left nostril breathing at 20 minutes a day for months. The genius switch is not for everyone. It is for the chosen one who has already been sincere for years, who has done the reading and the praying and the work, and who is finally willing to stop treating the fog as a character flaw and start treating it as something with a specific physical address. Most people will scroll straight past this. You are still here, which tells me something about which of those two you are. Dr. Barone and his colleagues said it would be incredible value even at $500 and next to $300 an hour or a $7,000 machine. That is not an unreasonable claim. It was not released at $500, not at $200, not at $100. It was released at $49, and today, on that page, there is an additional $10 off, which brings it to $39. 4 things come with it, at no extra cost. A guided visualization from a top-rated creator on a leading Calm application. A smart grocery guide that saves over $100 a month. A manifestation classic, more than 100 years old, that sells on its own for $20. And a printable 5 Habits infographic. All of it sits behind an unconditional money-back guarantee. Listen once or listen 80 times. If it does not do for you what it has done for 18,456 people, every dollar comes back, with no conditions and no questions. And here is what concerns me more than the money. The provision for your next season has almost certainly already been placed near you. It is a person, a conversation, an idea that comes at an odd hour. In the synchronized state, you see it and you move. In the partial state, the one a long ordeal leaves running, the same provision arrives and gets filed as noise, or as a threat, or as something to consider later. Nothing is taken from you. It simply passes, and a person can spend an entire post-pass window watching provision go by and conclude, again, that they were not chosen. One warning: if you go searching for tracks that sound similar, you will find copies, and none of them have the neural sync technology embedded in them, because the sequence is the entire mechanism, and that mechanism only exists in what the team actually built. The direct page is the only verified source, so if your spirit resonates with any of this, the link is in the description below and in the pinned comment. You can read every word on that page before deciding anything at all. I am not going to pretend this is the reason you passed, because it is not. You passed alone, years ago, with no help from me. The tool does not grade you, and it does not save you. It only deals with the state you were left in afterward. It is a shorter road, that is all. And shorter roads are allowed. That is the last time I will mention it. It is there if you want it, and it will still be there tomorrow. And if you never open the link at all this hour, still belongs to you completely. Now, let us finish this properly, and I want you quiet for the rest of it. I want to say thank you, not as a formality. You gave a stranger an hour of a life that has already cost you a great deal, and you did it on a day when there were easier things available. That is the same instinct that carried you through the season we have been discussing. You keep showing up for things that offer you nothing certain, and you have never once counted that as evidence of anything. Now the thing I told you was coming. Put both hands out in front of you, palms up, wherever you are sitting. This is the paper. Feel the weight of it. Every mark you made on it at 2 in the morning. Every time you went back over the middle of the page, looking for the mistake that would explain the silence. You have been holding this since the season ended. Your hands are tired in a way that has nothing to do with your hands. Now turn them over. Let it go. Let it fall to the floor of whatever room you are sitting in, and do not pick it back up. It is not yours anymore. It was marked, and the marking is finished, and the result was entered a long time ago. Now say these with me, out loud if you are able, because your own voice carries further into you than mine ever will. I am not a person who failed the test. I am a person who passed it and was never told. I am Dokimos, tested and approved through fire and confirmed as genuine. I am the first in my line. The pattern arrived at my door, and it does not continue past me. I am not waiting for a result. I am carrying one. If that is true, then put it below where you and I and everyone reading can see it. I am approved. Not I hope so. Not one day. I am approved. Say it for the morning after, and for every unwitnessed decent thing you did in a season that never gave you a receipt. It is done. Before you go, if any of this reached you, leave the small mark of approval, not for me, but so this finds the next person who is sitting in silence tonight, believing they failed something they actually passed. And then do this. Think of one specific person, not a list. One. Now picture their face, exactly as it looked the last time you saw them tired. Now name what they have been carrying this year, the thing they do not talk about. And now, send this to them, tonight, without a long message attached. Just send it. That is how a person gets their results read out loud to them, and you may be the only one who will do it. And if you want to keep walking with us, there are thousands of chosen ones here now, all of them people who came through something and came out with more than they realized. Join them. There is more coming, and I would like you here for it. Chosen one, may the grade you were never given be read into you every morning from now on. May the capacity you paid for in the dark find the exact people it was built for. May the pattern stop with you and stay stopped. And may you never again mistake a quiet morning for an ordinary one. Go in peace. You pass.